Al-Sayed brought peace to Oman soon after taking power in a palace coup 41 years ago. He also delivered paved roads, a public health system and more women's rights than other Gulf countries. But like the rest of the Arab world, Omanis now yearn for more.
The protesters' demands are listed very clearly right here in the middle of the roundabout. Number one is to dismiss all government ministers and investigate them for corruption. Number two is they want a new parliament elected by the people. And number three is to find more jobs for Omanis and raise everybody's salaries.
Military helicopters buzz over the crowd, but there hasn't been a repeat of last week's violence, where at least one protester was killed by riot police, while a shopping centre, police station and government building were all torched. These protesters say they denounce acts of violence, but hope a calm, peaceful plea will be heard by their beloved leader.
If he did know, he will change, we are sure.
How long do you plan to stay here for?
Until all our demands will be achieved.
The role of the military is key here now, respected by the people much more than the police, but they have very little experience in dealing with civil unrest, leaving the days ahead filled with uncertainty.
Still much more to come on the programme, including mourners gather for the funeral of Pakistan's former minorities minister, who was gunned down after speaking out against the country's blasphemy law. And China announces a big boost in military spending, making its neighbours nervous.
Over the north of Beijing, as the visibility drops, you'll still see things with perfect clarity.
Welcome back. Well, across the United States, we are looking at spring, of course, and that's when we start to see the active weather come through the parts of the southeastern section of the United States. First of all, I want to show what's happening on the satellite image. Right here is the frontal boundary. You really can't see it on the satellite, but it is beginning to develop. Now, over the next couple of days, we are going to be seeing a lot of rain come out of this frontal boundary, anywhere from Texas all the way up to parts of Georgia, even up to New York. Now, it does change once you get across the Canadian border. We're looking at some very heavy snow for Ottawa as well as Montreal. That snow could be anywhere from 200 to 300 millimeters of snow. So if you are traveling to Canada, you're going to be expecting some airport delays in that region. Out towards the west, we are looking at some snow if you're doing some late season skiing anywhere from Seattle up to Vancouver. Very nice there, but some clouds pushing into San Francisco over the weekend as well. Down towards the south, we're going to be seeing some very heavy rain showers across southern Brazil, anywhere from Rio de Janeiro over to Sao Paulo, as well as the northeastern corner of Peru. That's going to be very localized heavy rain, so that could mean flooding in that region as well. Bolivia will finally get a break from the rain. A little bit drier for La Paz, but the temperatures are only going to get up to about 13 degrees in their forecast. And very quickly over towards Europe, the rain for Italy is still going to be very intense over the next couple of days, but that should start to die down as we go into Sunday.
Qatar Airways, world's 5-star airline.
A history of guerrilla warfare, a place on the global stage. They were an organization created for a stateless population. But before fighting for their land, why did the PLO fight for independence from their Arab neighbors? Chronicling the turbulent story of the struggle for a Palestinian homeland, PLO, History of a Revolution, at this time on Al Jazeera.
Watching Al Jazeera, a reminder of our top stories. At least 30 people have been killed in the Libyan town of AlJazeera near Tripoli. It comes after forces loyal to Muammar Gaddafi attacked opposition fighters who had been in control. Libyan state television is reporting that pro-Gaddafi forces have now taken the town from rebel hands. There's also been fighting in Gaddafi's stronghold Tripoli. Security forces fired tear gas on protesters who took to the streets after Friday prayers. And protesters gathered in Benghazi too, demanding an end to Colonel Gaddafi's rule. It comes after a series of airstrikes by pro-Gaddafi forces on eastern towns in the past week. Well, joining me now in the studio is Tarek Youssef, who's a senior research fellow at the Dubai School of Government. Thanks very much indeed for being with us again. It's quite a complicated picture at the moment of claims and counterclaims about who's controlling which town. Just to start with Zawiya, why is this town important, and what's your impression of what's going on there?
Zawiya, a week ago, had fallen outside of the control of Gaddafi's regime. It's a city that's fairly important, partly because it's only half an hour from Tripoli. And the regime seems to have lost complete control very quickly in the run-up to the protests. So the regime has every incentive, but also the capability of moving troops fairly close to a city center and implementing a strategy of terrorizing the population, perhaps moving some military units and trying to inflict some damage to loosen up the opposition's control over Zawiya. I think Zawiya has some symbolic importance. It's also a city with a refinery nearby, and that refinery provides a lot of refined products for Tripoli and presumably for the military that Gaddafi still controls.
I mean, could we end up here with a sort of, we could clearly end up with a protracted battle for these towns, with them falling in and out of government and rebel control?
Clearly we could. We're looking at that scenario, especially in the cities that are close enough to Tripoli. The regime wants to maintain an image of control, that it both maintains control over not just Tripoli, but some of the surrounding areas. In the east, that protracted battle we're ways away from it. And we've seen in the last couple of days how attempts by Gaddafi's military to retake some of the cities that had fallen out of their control had kind of failed. In fact, we saw the opposite to some extent today. So some of the forces in the east, in the hands of the opposition, moving further west, close to Ras Lanuf, which is a very important oil export terminal.
No, you mentioned Tripoli there briefly. We heard earlier in our report from the Guardian correspondent saying that there was really quick methods to kind of crack down on anyone who was trying to protest outside after Friday prayers. Tanks on street corners. Really trying to kind of get a grip on it and make sure that no one actually had a chance to protest. Are you surprised that they even tried in those circumstances?
I'm not surprised. I think Tripoli is boiling, but the element of repression and fear and outright intimidation. Let's remember the regime now has invited foreign reporters and correspondents to Tripoli, so it has every incentive to project an image of calm, and if that means using whatever methods at its disposal to essentially quell down very quickly and crush any out protests in public, that will be what I would expect to see.
And let's take it sort of internationally now. I mean, there's a sense in some reports are suggesting that that the kind of the headline from the Obama speech that we heard interviews that we heard last night is that essentially the US has kind of intervention fatigue, and that they're sort of saying, we'll get ready to help in case there's a humanitarian crisis, but kind of not really saying that there is one now. What's your read on how the Obama administration is dealing with this now?
Yeah. I think the international community, including the Obama administration, has locked itself in a position of saying no to Gaddafi, he must go. I don't think they're going to go backward from that position. Now, how fast, under what circumstances will they deploy military options or options that are designed to do more than just help avoid a humanitarian crisis, that I think remains to be seen, and that requires a lot of discussions, both within the US, between the US and its allies, but I don't discount that there are possibilities